Your baby can't speak yet, but long before they have words, they are absorbing everything: the rhythm of your voice, the expression on your face, the speed of your response. What's remarkable about early infant development isn't how fragile babies are, it's how sensitive they are. There's an important difference. This video is about 10 completely ordinary things that millions of thoughtful, attentive parents do every day without realizing what's happening beneath the surface. These aren't signs of bad parenting. They're gaps in what most of us were ever taught about how the infant brain actually works. And once you understand what's happening developmentally, something shifts. Not guilt, clarity. Let's begin. 1. Delayed responses to crying. There's a widely held belief that waiting before responding to a baby's cries teaches independence. It feels logical, but what infant neuroscience has revealed paints a more nuanced picture. When a baby cries and no one comes, their body doesn't simply wait. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, rises rapidly, and in the first year of life, repeated cortisol spikes without a soothing response from a caregiver don't just cause momentary distress. They begin to shape the architecture of the developing brain, particularly the regions responsible for emotional regulation, trust, and memory. Dr. Alan Shore, a leading neuropsychologist who has spent decades studying early emotional development, describes the back and forth between caregiver and baby as more than bonding. It is, quite literally, brain wiring. When responses are consistent, the infant's nervous system learns a foundational message. The world is safe, I matter, help arrives. When responses are repeatedly delayed, a quieter and more persistent message forms in its place. This isn't about responding to every sound instantly. Life doesn't allow for that, and one delayed response changes nothing. What matters is the pattern. And understanding what happens neurologically in those moments of silence tends to shift how parents think about the waited out approach. 2. Stress carried in the voice. Here's something most parents are never told. Babies are exquisitely sensitive to vocal prosody, the emotional texture of sound, before they can understand a single word. By 3 months old, an infant can distinguish between a calm voice and a tense one with remarkable accuracy, and their nervous system responds accordingly. Researchers at the University of Oregon found that infants as young as 6 months showed measurable stress responses, changes in heart rate and cortisol, when they overheard adult arguments, not while awake and watching, while asleep. So when a parent picks up their baby after a difficult day and says, in a tight, exhausted voice, "Okay, okay, I'm here," the baby doesn't register the words. They register the tone. And to a nervous system that is entirely dependent on its caregiver for a sense of safety, a tense voice communicates something simple and powerful. The person I rely on is not okay right now, which means I may not be safe either. This isn't a call to perform cheerfulness when you're struggling. It's simply worth knowing that one slow breath before lifting a baby, just enough to shift your own nervous system slightly, genuinely changes the message your body sends. 3. Pushing through a baby's social limits. It's a common scene. A well-meaning relative leans in close, voice raised, face animated, and the baby turns away, looks down, or begins to fuss. The adult's instinct is to try harder. "Oh, come on, look at me." What's actually happening in that moment is worth understanding. Babies use gaze aversion, looking away, as a regulatory strategy. It isn't shyness. It isn't rejection. It's their only available way of communicating. "This is too much right now. I need a break." When that signal is consistently overridden, something gets stored in the baby's developing sense of the world, not as a conscious memory, but as a felt body understanding of how interactions work. Specifically, that their cues don't necessarily change what happens next, that their version of enough doesn't always count. No single enthusiastic grandparent is going to leave a lasting mark here, but as a pattern, it's one worth gently redirecting, precisely because the baby is doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and noticing them do it matters. 4. Minimizing their emotional experience. A baby becomes genuinely distressed, perhaps because you've moved something out of reach, or because they're simply overwhelmed. Your response, natural and well-intentioned, is, "You're fine, you're okay." The science behind why this matters is actually fascinating. Babies have no capacity for self-regulation. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for managing emotional responses, won't be fully developed until the mid-20s. What infants have instead is co-regulation. They borrow the regulated nervous system of their caregiver to help settle their own. A calm, present parent is literally a neurological scaffold. When a parent minimizes the emotion rather than meeting it, the baby's distress has nowhere to land. And over time, a consistent gap between what a child feels and what they're told to feel about it becomes one of the earliest foundations of emotional confusion, difficulty trusting one's own internal experience. Research on chronic misattunement, not abuse, not neglect, but simply a repeated mismatch between a baby's emotional state and the response it receives, shows it to be one of the more significant predictors of emotional difficulty in later childhood. The intervention, interestingly, is simple. You don't need to solve the emotion, you just need to reflect it. "You're really frustrated right now, aren't you?" That's it. That seeing, that naming, is what co-regulation actually looks like. Here's what's striking about all of this. None of these behaviors are done with any intention of causing distress. They're often done from the most loving place possible. The issue isn't intent, it's information. 5. A still face at the wrong moment. By now, most parents have heard something about screen time. But the research that's emerged recently focuses on something more specific than babies watching screens. It's about what happens when a parent's attention is genuinely absorbed by a device during moments their baby is seeking connection. In the now famous still face experiments, originally conducted by Dr. Edward Tronick, researchers had mothers interact normally with their infants, then suddenly shift to a completely blank, unresponsive expression. Within seconds, babies became visibly distressed. They tried every social tool available to them, smiling, vocalizing, pointing. When nothing worked, they collapsed inward. Some cried. Some showed physiological signs of acute stress. When a parent is deeply absorbed in a phone, their face goes still in a similar way. Responsiveness drops. And to a baby whose primary source of information about the world's safety is the caregiver's face, that blank expression, even briefly, even repeatedly across a day, registers in much the same way. Your face is your baby's emotional mirror. That's not a metaphor. It's how the infant nervous system is designed to work. 6. An environment that asks too much. We live in a culture that tends to equate stimulation with enrichment. Bright toys, sensory play, baby gyms with flashing lights, background music, classes for every stage, all of it offered from a genuine desire to give babies every possible advantage. But a newborn's nervous system can process only a fraction of what adults take for granted. A room that feels comfortably busy to an adult, TV on, people talking, music playing, notifications buzzing, can be genuinely overwhelming to an immature nervous system that hasn't yet developed the capacity to filter sensory input. The signs are almost always misread. An overstimulated baby may cry, arch their back, look away, go glassy-eyed, hiccup, or suddenly zone out. And the typical response is to offer more movement, more sound, more distraction, which compounds the problem. What an overstimulated infant needs is the opposite: dimness, quiet, stillness, and the calm presence of a regulated nervous system beside their own. Less, not more. 7. Missed moments of shared attention. This one is quiet and easy to overlook, and according to developmental research, it may be one of the most consequential items on this list. One of the more significant findings in infant psychology over the past 2 decades concerns what researchers call serve and return interactions. These are the moments when a baby does something, looks at something with curiosity, makes a sound, points at a light, and a caregiver responds to it, acknowledges it, follows where the baby's attention has gone. Oh, you see that? That's the ceiling fan. This back and forth, casual, constant, unremarkable in the moment, builds neural connections in the prefrontal cortex at a rate that doesn't happen in its absence. Language development, emotional intelligence, and executive function are all being wired through these tiny exchanges, not through toys or classes or structured enrichment. When those moments are missed, when a baby points and nobody looks, when curiosity gets no acknowledgement, the neural pathways that were primed to form simply don't. The window doesn't close permanently, but it narrows. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child describes serve and return as the single most important interaction in early development, not the most expensive intervention, the most present one. 8. Disappearing without transition. Many parents have been advised to slip away quietly when leaving, that visible goodbyes cause unnecessary distress. The reasoning feels sound. In practice, the research suggests otherwise. When a baby is happily engaged and their primary caregiver simply vanishes, no warning, no transition, just absence where presence was, the nervous system doesn't experience this as smooth. It experiences it as alarming. And the lesson that gets registered isn't everything is fine. It's closer to the person I most rely on can disappear without warning, which means I need to stay vigilant. Babies who experience consistent, predictable transitions, even when those transitions involve crying at the goodbye, show stronger attachment security over time than those whose caregivers regularly disappear unannounced. The crying at a visible, acknowledged departure isn't distress accumulating, it's distress releasing. The difference matters. 9. Touch as an afterthought. Touch is sometimes spoken about as a comfort or a bonus. The research frames it differently, as a biological necessity. When a baby is held, oxytocin is released in both infant and caregiver. Heart rate stabilizes. Cortisol drops. The vagal nerve, a central pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system, activates, promoting a physiological state of calm and safety. All of this happens through physical contact. But it's not only about picking a baby up when they cry. It's the incidental contact throughout the day. A hand resting on their back while they play, a brush of the cheek while passing, the warmth of being carried. These micro moments are continuously communicating something to the infant nervous system. You are here. You are safe. You are not alone. Babies in loving, attentive homes, who nonetheless experience chronically low physical contact, show measurably elevated baseline cortisol levels. Their nervous systems are running a quiet, low-grade stress response, not because anything is wrong, but because one of the primary biological signals of safety is consistently absent. 10. being present in body but not in self. The last item on this list is perhaps the most important, and the least often spoken about honestly. There's a kind of parental unavailability that isn't physical absence, it's emotional absence. The parent who is there, who feeds, changes, holds, responds, but who is internally somewhere far away, grieving something, moving through depression, carrying anxiety that has no outlet, dissociated from exhaustion. Babies don't only receive the actions of their caregivers, they receive the emotional state. Research on parental depression, even in mothers who performed every act of caregiving consistently, found that their infants showed disrupted attachment patterns, elevated stress responses, and altered development in the brain regions governing emotion and stress regulation. This is not about blame. It is about something genuinely profound. The quality of your internal presence matters to your baby in ways that no amount of doing can fully compensate for. And the most meaningful thing a parent can offer, more than any toy, class, or structured intervention, is their own nervous system in a state of relative calm, which means that a parent who seeks support, who practices even small acts of self-regulation, who pauses to breathe before re-entering the room, is doing something real and measurable for their child. Here we are at the end of these 10, and it's worth pausing to notice what kind of parent is even watching something like this. The parent who seeks to understand, who asks whether they might be missing something, who wants to see their child more clearly. That quality is not separate from good parenting. It is good parenting. Developmental psychologist D.W. Winnicott coined the phrase good enough parent, not as a consolation prize, but as a precise description of what children actually need. Not perfection, but repair. Not constant attunement, but the consistent return to it. The moments of disconnection don't define the relationship. The reconnection does. The I see you now after the miss. That pattern of rupture and repair is, quite literally, the architecture of secure attachment. So the next time your baby looks at you, that direct, unguarded gaze that only infants can give, know that they are reading you, learning you, organizing their understanding of the world around you, and that you, trying to understand them a little more clearly, is already exactly what they need.